In previous videos, we modeled graphs in Kinetica using 2 out of the 4 components, edges and weights. In this video, we'll add the other 2 components, restrictions and nodes. With all 4 components turned on, Kinetica can be used to model really complex scenarios as graphs. Let's consider restrictions first. Restrictions allow us to block off edges and nodes from consideration when solving a graph. We can include information about the restrictions component either while creating it, as we are doing now, or when we want to solve it. Restrictions can be applied using either an on-off switch or by comparing against a value. Let's explore the first case. Here we have an on-off switch that indicates the edges that are blocked for traversal. The switch can take 2 values, 0 for blocked and 1 for open. So for this table, the edges 2 and 5 are blocked. So this means that if we wanted to solve this graph to find the best way to get from the leftmost point to the rightmost point, we would not be able to include the edges 2 and 5, which happen to be the first and second best paths. Instead, we will have to pick the third best path that goes via the edge 4, followed by 6, with a combined cost of 25. While being able to block edges is great, what if we wanted to block off a node instead? For instance, say there are 2 types of nodes where these edges meet. One which is a roundabout and another which is a regular junction. What if we wanted to avoid any nodes that were roundabouts? This information cannot be included in the edges table since each edge, by definition, must have 2 associated nodes. So every row in the edge table will represent 2 nodes instead of 1. So the information about nodes needs to be included using a different table. Let's look at this next. This time we have 2 tables, one for edges and another for nodes. The table for nodes contains the WKT point that explicitly identifies a node and some additional information about the type of node, which in this case is either regular or a roundabout. Now using this new information, we can explicitly define these nodes instead of implicitly generating them based on the intersection of edges. And since we now also have the information on whether a node is a roundabout or not, we can specify a restriction that matches the value for the type of node to a roundabout to impose a restriction on it. This would mean that any path that goes through node 2 cannot be traversed anymore. Let's note a few things before we wrap up. The first is that when we apply a restriction, we can either use an on-off switch or compare against a value. The second is that from a data modeling standpoint, information about nodes needs to be included as a separate nodes table since it cannot be incorporated into an edges table. So to summarize, to create a graph in Kinetica, we have to specify a table that can identify edges. These graphs can be directed or undirected. Every edge can be associated with a weight. These weights can be specified along with the edges while creating the graph, or they can be specified at the time of solving. Restrictions impose blocks on nodes or edges while traversing the graph. Like weights, restrictions can be added either at the time of creation or separately when solving the graph. Finally, we can use a separate nodes table that can be used to specify node-specific attributes. These can be used for querying and imposing restrictions.